One of these jets carries a bathtub of titanium around its pilot, the other doesn't bother. Two air forces on opposite sides of the planet faced the exact same problem in the exact same decade. Kill tanks, fly low, take fire, come home. That was the brief. Nothing more specific than that. And from that single brief, two engineering teams built two of the strangest, ugliest, most effective aircraft ever flown. They look almost related. A stranger might call them cousins, but underneath the skin, they disagree about almost everything. This is the story of what happens when two militaries answer the same question honestly and arrive somewhere completely different. The problem itself, because the problem is brutal. By the late 1960s, Soviet armor doctrine called for tens of thousands of tanks pouring through the Fulda Gap into Western Europe. NATO planners did the math and did not like the answer. Stopping that many tanks meant something had to fly low, slow, and armed enough to matter again and again, for days. The Soviets had the mirror image of the same nightmare. Their own doctrine depended on close support jets surviving over their own advancing columns. Both sides needed the same tool, a flying gun platform that could absorb a hit and keep flying. Fast jets were a poor fit, too quick to aim, too fragile to take a hit from ground fire. What both air forces needed was slower, uglier, tougher. The Americans called their program the AX. It would become the A10. The Soviets ran a parallel competition. Sukhoi's entry would become the Su-25. Neither team knew what the other was doing. There was no copying here. Just two engineering cultures working the same equation alone. So let's start with what America built and why it looks the way it does. The first design choice was the most radical. Build the pilot a bathtub of titanium and build the plane around it. 1,200 pounds of armor plate, thick enough to deflect a 23mm round. The pilot doesn't sit in the jet. The pilot sits inside a vault and the jet is built around the vault. Then came the engines. Mounted high on the rear fuselage, tucked behind the wing. That placement wasn't about speed, it was about hiding the engines from heat-seeking missiles fired from the ground. The wing sits low and wide, built to keep flying even with a third of it torn away. Redundancy runs through the entire airframe. Two engines, two tails, two of almost every control system. If hydraulics fail completely, mechanical cables still let the pilot fly the jet home by muscle alone. This is an aircraft engineered around a single, uncompromising premise. The pilot survives, no matter what the airframe costs. And then there's the gun. The GAU-8 Avenger, a 7-barrel rotary cannon almost as long as a small car. It fires depleted uranium rounds designed to punch through Soviet tank armor from directly overhead. The gun is so large, engineers didn't build a plane around a gun. They built a gun and hung a plane off it. That's not an exaggeration. The airframe's center line was drawn around the recoil axis of that cannon. Every part of this jet says the same thing. Slow down, get close, absorb the punishment, kill the tank anyway. Now look at what the Soviets built for the identical mission. It has armor too, a titanium tub around the cockpit, just like its American rival. But almost everything else about the Frogfoot answers the problem differently. Start with the engines. Two Tumansky turbojets, mounted low, tucked into the fuselage roots. Soviet engineers made a different bet. These engines aren't hidden from missiles, they're simply expected to survive one. The design philosophy wasn't damage avoidance, it was damage indifference. Soviet doctrine assumed these jets would be flown by conscripts over their own front lines in massive numbers, and many would not come home. So the Frogfoot wasn't built to be irreplaceable. It was built to be cheap, simple, and fast to produce in enormous quantity. Where the A10 is a fortress built for one irreplaceable pilot, the Su-25 is a tool built to be spent. That difference comes straight from doctrine, not incompetence. Soviet planners never expected air superiority over the battlefield. They assumed their close air support jets would fight inside someone else's air defense envelope constantly and simply accepted the loss rate. The gun tells the same story. The Su-25 carries a 30mm twin-barrel cannon, a fraction of the size of the American gun. It's smaller because the jet isn't meant to be the sole tank killer. It's one weapon among many, backed by rockets, bombs, and guided missiles slung under the wings. The American approach concentrates killing power into one enormous gun. The Soviet approach spreads it across a flexible weapons load. Two philosophies. One says specialize completely, the other says stay adaptable. Now put them side by side, and the contrast gets stranger the closer you look. The A-10 weighs in around 50,000 pounds fully loaded. The Su-25 is lighter, closer to 44,000. The American jet carries more fuel, more armor, and a heavier gun. It was built to loiter for hours over a battlefield. The Soviet jet trades some of that endurance for speed and a smaller radar signature closer to the ground. Even the wings disagree. The A-10's straight wing is built for slow, stable turns at low speed, almost like a glider with guns. The Frogfoot's wing sweeps slightly back, built for a faster ingress and a quicker escape from the target area. One jet wants to stay and grind, the other wants to hit hard and leave fast. That single difference in wing geometry tells you everything about how each country expected this war to look. America expected an open sky, contested but survivable, where a jet could circle and pick its shots. The Soviets expected a sky thick with anti-aircraft fire, where survival meant speed, not loitering. Neither assumption was wrong. They were built for two different versions of the same war. So how did these two machines actually perform once real wars stopped being theoretical? The Su-25 went to Afghanistan first, flying low over mountains against fighters with shoulder-fired missiles. The jets took hits constantly. Many limped home with engines shredded and tails torn open. And that was the design working exactly as intended, built to absorb damage, not to avoid it. The A-10 had its proving ground in the Gulf War, over open desert against Iraqi armor columns. It destroyed more tanks than any other aircraft in that war, and several came home with holes you could put a fist through. One jet returned to base with an engine destroyed, half a tail gone, and hydraulics failed completely. The pilot flew it home on the manual cable system, the one engineered for exactly this moment. Two different survival strategies, tested in two different deserts, and both worked. Fast forward to today, and both jets are still flying. Still doing the same job, decades after retirement was first proposed for each of them. In Ukraine, the Frogfoot has flown low-altitude strike missions against modern portable air defense systems it was never designed to face. Losses have been heavy. The jet's original bet, cheap and expendable, is being tested against missiles its designers never imagined. Meanwhile, the A-10 keeps facing a different threat. Not enemy fire, but budget committees who think it's obsolete. For 50 years, the Pentagon has tried to retire the Warthog. For 50 years, it kept flying anyway. Not because it's elegant, because nothing else does its exact job as well, at low altitude, with a gun, for hours at a time. Two jets, two philosophies, both still airborne, both still proving their original designers right. So what does this actually tell us? Not about the planes, about the countries that built them. America built a machine around the idea that one trained pilot is worth more than the jet carrying him. Titanium tubs, redundant systems, manual backups, every design choice bends toward bringing that one person home. The Soviet Union built a machine around a different premise entirely. The mission matters, the individual airframe, and sometimes the individual pilot is replaceable. That's not a moral judgment. It's an engineering signature, stamped into steel and titanium, decades before either jet ever fired a shot in anger. Look at any aircraft long enough, and it stops being a machine. It becomes an argument the country made about what its own people are worth. The Warthog and the Frogfoot never fought each other, but in every rivet and every gun barrel, they've been arguing for 50 years. If you want more stories like this, where the machine tells you more than the history books do, subscribe and stick around for the next one. Because the argument never actually ended. Walk onto any modern flight line, and you'll still find the same two philosophies fighting for space. The Su-25 is still flying combat sorties today, decades after its designers assumed it would be retired. Simple airframes age well. There is less to break, less to recalibrate, less that a war-strained supply chain has to replace. That is the Soviet bet finally paying its dividend. Build it crude enough, and it outlives the war it was designed for. The A-10 made the opposite bet, and for a long time, the Pentagon kept trying to kill it anyway. Budget after budget, someone in Washington proposed retiring it. Budget after budget, the infantry it protected asked for it back. That is not sentiment, that is data. Ground units under fire have a way of settling design arguments that think tanks cannot. Both aircraft answer to the same brutal law of ground attack. You cannot support troops from an altitude where you cannot see them. Every fast jet program since Vietnam has tried to solve close air support from higher and faster. Neither of these planes agreed. That stubbornness is the real inheritance of both programs. Two air forces on opposite sides of a wall independently refused to give up on slow. The Frogfoot's answer to modern air defense was armor. The Warthog's answer was the same armor, just arranged around a different set of assumptions. Neither assumption survives a modern surface-to-air missile battery unescorted. That is the uncomfortable postscript both nations now have to reckon with. In Ukraine, both descendants of this rivalry have had to relearn the same lesson from opposite cockpits. Fly low, fly fast, and never fly straight. The gun that defined the Warthog barely fires anymore in real combat. Precision munitions took over the job the barrel was built for. But the airframe built to carry that gun is still exactly the airframe you want carrying smart weapons low and slow over a battlefield. The gun didn't become obsolete. The mission just outgrew it. That is a very different kind of aging than falling apart. The Su-25 never had one gun to define it. It had a philosophy. Whatever is cheap, mount it and let the pilot figure out the rest. That difference in philosophy is really a difference in what each country could afford to lose. America built a scalpel, the Soviets built a shovel. Neither insult is fair. A shovel that keeps digging after 50 years has earned its name. And a scalpel that survives being stabbed thousands of times and keeps cutting has earned its name too. Two engineering answers, born from two economies, two doctrines, two ideas about what a pilot's life was worth in the math. Neither side ever admitted the other got it right, but both kept building the same shape decade after decade, and that is the real admission. You can retire a jet. It is much harder to retire an idea that keeps proving itself under fire. So the next time you see one of these ugly, slow, low-flying machines overhead, you are not looking at an old design. You are looking at an argument that still hasn't lost. That's the story of two planes built to do one ugly job well. If you want the next machine that argues back, subscribe, and I'll see you there.